In 2016, some of us started gathering around the dream of a new spiritual community. We imagined becoming a church where we could wrestle together with the kinds of questions that come up when you pursue an ancient faith in a modern world. We wanted to be a church marked by simplicity in our spiritual practices, steering clear of some of the performance pressure that so often marks our experience in church and in life. We wanted to be a church deeply connected to our context, which for us is the city of South Bend. And we were convinced that we needed to be as inclusive as Jesus was, welcoming one another from the widest possible spectrum of belief and doubt, and especially learning to honor the image of God in people who've most often been unwelcome in church spaces. Along the way, as we came together, we roamed the city looking for a home. We met in houses and in conference rooms. We met at the Brick and Century Center in the Doubletree Hotel and Union Station. And after all of that roaming, we found a home on the old factory floor of Studebaker in Building 112. That space, which had been full of life in earlier decades, part of the economic engine driving the city, had then been vacated, abandoned, left dark and empty. And we had the privilege, along with our partners at Studebaker, of transforming that space and seeing it filled with light and life again. And since moving into Studebaker, we've been surprised with some really beautiful and unexpected seasons of growth as a community. We've navigated our way through COVID, looking for ways to create safe and sacred space during that hard season. As we've emerged from COVID, we found ourselves coming together again in that space. And we've discovered that not only is it a great space for those of us who live right here in South Bend and can come together there, but it's also a place where we can make the kinds of things that serve a lot of you who are part of our long distance family. We know there's a lot of you out there who are part of SBCC, not because you're here in South Bend, but because you've kind of found a sense of spiritual home with us through tools like the podcast that we make at the space like Studebaker. We're grateful for Studebaker. We're thankful for our time there. However, our time there is coming to an end. Our lease at Studebaker ends in the summer of 2023, and it's been clarified for us that we're not going to be able to renew our lease in that current space. So we've been hunting, searching, thinking together about what we should do. We've explored other possibilities at Studebaker, and we've also looked around the city for what else we might want to do in the future. And after talking with a lot of you and hearing feedback, we've landed on a commitment for where we're headed, and I want to tell you about it. The printing press building of the South Bend Tribune stands in the heart of downtown South Bend. This building was meant to elevate important stories, to amplify the truth, and help people understand the world and their place in it. Built in the 1990s to expand the paper's printing capacity, it fell out of use as the internet decreased demand for printed newspapers. And we think it's time for that building to have a new chapter, not just for the benefit of SBCC, but for the benefit of everyone in South Bend. We figured out pretty quickly at Studebaker that there are a lot of good and important things happening in South Bend, and a lot of good and important things that want to happen in South Bend that need a place to happen. And it's been our honor to provide a place for some of those things. So for example, Habitat for Humanity and United Way have used our space. Our friends and neighbors over at Hope Ministries, people who help members of our own community who are transitioning out of homelessness, they've been able to use the space for meetings with their teams. The South Bend Board of Public Safety, the group that oversees police department discipline in South Bend, was reworking their discipline matrix, and they needed to host a public meeting for feedback. And we were especially honored to be a place to host such an important conversation. Along the way, we worked with Notre Dame and Ideal Week to host Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired Magazine. Kevin came to South Bend, where we had a fascinating conversation about the future of spirituality and technology. We threw a party for the city with Studebaker Talks, where we heard stories about South Bend's people, ingenuity, and progress. And last fall, we had over 100 church leaders, artists, other stakeholders come together from all over the country gathering at Studebaker so that together we could think about what church and faith look like in a post-evangelical frame. Now, with all that history of how our space can get used for big questions and wonderful projects in the common good, we want more of that happening at the Tribune. So let me kind of sum all this up. This is why we want to purchase and renovate the Tribune building. We want to secure a long-term home for our church. We want to be better stewards of our resources by working toward a rent-free, debt-free future. We want to take this old building in the heart of downtown and fill it with new life. And we want to share that space with community partners who can use it all week long for the common good. Now, that's the heart behind the project. I want to show you what the transformation will look like. Imagine with me this space in the heart of downtown being transformed. The entryway could use some greening up, could be softened to be more welcoming, and we're going to do that so that you would enter the building through that courtyard area. You'd find yourself in what is right now the kind of loading dock warehouse space, but we're going to take that and make all of it social space. a place to linger before and after gatherings, a place for kids to run around, for conversations to happen. During the week, this could be a great place for community connection that happens. Of course, we got coffee service because it's really a lot more fun to connect if you got a cup of coffee in hand. And then you'll see that we've got a dedicated part of the building for kids on the ground floor. This is really exciting to us. We want kids to have a more secure, dedicated area just for them. We're gonna take that wall of brick on the right side that you just saw, punch new windows in it, fill this place with daylight so that it's both full of light and transparent for everything going on there. These are large group instruction areas at both ends of the hallway. And then you notice that we've got dedicated classrooms in the middle there for different age ranges. And then you head upstairs, you see this gorgeous, gritty industrial cathedral that we're gonna transform into new sacred space for us and for others. We're gonna fill in that hole, and then we're gonna begin to make it a place that feels a little bit like home for South Bend City Church. You'll see that we've preserved the in-the-round seating. That's been really important for the way that we gather. We love these windows, a chance to let daylight in and look out on the city, not to worship in some darkened, hermetically sealed environment that separates us from God's good world all around us, but rather to be reminded that we are sitting in the middle of it the whole time. And by the way, what better way to remember that we're in the middle of God's good world right here in South Bend than to take that rooftop and green it up and make it useful too. This could be cafe seating, it could also be a place for other events. But I think you probably feel with me when you see this, that this building is just aching with potential. It's sort of pregnant with possibility. And this is what we think it looks like when those possibilities are realized. Not bad, right? Now let's talk about what it costs and how we'll pay for it. The acquisition of the building, just the purchase price on all of that space downtown is a flat $1 million. And the renovation that you just saw, all of that transformation costs roughly $4.5 million. That's a grand total project scope of $5.5 million. And now let's talk about how we'll pay for it. We're gonna do this with a combination of the money that you and I are gonna give, of a commitment that we're gonna make over the next 2 years to sort of front end the funding on this project. And we're gonna combine that with a mortgage. On the mortgage, we're using our current lease payment at Studebaker as a benchmark for what we can afford. So when we use the lease payment, we end up with a mortgage of roughly $2.5 million that we think is appropriate for a community like ours. Which, by the way, you probably noticed, this is not us like assuming budgetary growth to make this work. This is us just kind of assuming that the way things have been is the way they will roughly be, which seems like the most prudent way to make this kind of a commitment on a mortgage. Now, a $5.5 million project scope and a $2.5 million mortgage, if you're doing the math, you realize that leaves $3 million for us to give as a community, both local and long distance, over the next 2 years. And that's the invitation right now. That's actually how we make this happen, is we make commitments between now and early April for what we're gonna give over the next 2 years. A couple of details about those commitments. First of all, please remember, this is in addition to what a lot of us give to the general fund. So all the regular stuff that our church does, like staffing and ministry programs and kids resources, all of that's made possible by the regular giving of people who give on a whatever basis they give, right? If you're a person who gives like that and you're gonna make a commitment to the Tribune project, please don't just reallocate those funds, because we can't do that. This Tribune commitment is above and beyond whatever kind of regular giving you or I do to the church life, right? The other things that you should know about these commitments is when we gather these up, which is going to happen between now and early April, we actually take these commitments to the bank, quite literally, and that's part of how we secure the mortgage part of the project. And the other thing about these commitments is these commitments will actually determine the final scope of the project. We'll take our mortgage capacity alongside whatever we're going to give over the next 2 years, and that will become the actual budget for the version of the project that we execute. By the way, some might be thinking about giving not with cash, but some asset-based stuff, right? Maybe you've got stock or property or something like that. Now, rather than sell that and you pay the gains tax on it and then giving cash to the church, you should know that another way to do that is you can actually donate things like stock, property, or other assets directly to the Tribune project, and then we can work that out together. Now, when you come to a commitment, whether it's cash up front or cash over 2 years or stock or property or something else, head to southbendcitychurch.com. You'll see there we got a brand new webpage built. It's got all the details on the project, frequently asked questions, and it's got a link to a commitment form. And we're asking you to use that form between now and early April to let us know what you want to do over the next 2 years. For decades, earlier in the life of the Tribune, the masthead of that paper described the publication as a paper for the people. And as we get ready to transform the Tribune, we actually think that its purpose remains quite the same. It's just that now, rather than being a paper for the people, it's time for the Tribune to be a place for the people. For the people of South Bend City Church to grow in the way of Jesus together, a place for us to create the resources that serve the long-distance church family, a safe place for kids and students to flourish and feel at home, but not just a place for our church, a place for everyone in South Bend where we can work together on common ground for the common good. And now's our chance to make it happen together.